Welcome to Badaboom. I'm Chris. On this episode, we have on writer-artist of Blood of the Taken, Sian Mandrake. Published by Storm King Comics, Blood of the Taken is the story of a 500-year-old vampire who, after losing her brood, kidnaps two best friends, and that is where the horror begins. Mandrake talks to us about their horror influences and how growing up in a household of creators led to Blood of the Taken. Blood of the Taken will hit bookstores on October 1st. Listen in and Badaboom. Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Me and Troy are super excited to be able to talk to you. Blood of the Taken is coming out next month. We're recording this late August. And what's it been like? It seems like an interesting journey because it started as one thing and then evolved into the other. So what's that journey been like?
So I've been working on it since 2019, is when I started writing it as it was first like kind of like a storybook, like not a children's book per se, but like a story like illustrated book. And then it became a full-length novel. And then the pandemic shut everything down like the week I finished. And I decided to make it a comic book series. So I think it kind of like it just kept evolving. Which was really fun. It was a really interesting experience, and it kind of took me out of comics for a while. Not that I was ever fully out, because I was like always working as a colorist and things. But it kind of took me on this like learning process of writing and everything, and then brought me back into fully developing this project for myself for the first time, getting to do something pencils, inks, colors, which I never got to do as a comic book artist, even though I've been working in the field for a while. So that was really cool.
I always find that insane when someone's able creatively to kind of put all that together. And what
Mhm.
was that like sort of to get to the finish line, especially sort of you're writing it, you're penciling it, you're inking it, you're also coloring it. So getting to the finish line, what was that like sort of in terms of how did it feel? Was it something where you're like relieved or super proud of yourself?
I think I don't want to say obsessed, but I was really passionate about it because I really wanted to get the story out to people. It was definitely something that I was like really focused on getting an issue out, and I'm like, once I got that issue out, I'm like, now I want to get the second one out. So it was just like for me, it was just a really exciting process. And it was never like there was never this end goal of like when I was gonna stop and stuff. And when Storm King picked it up, I want to say 2021 or 2022. It was really cool because I'm like, now we get to do like this whole 150-page graphic novel with it. And I was really excited to see like this all come together as one book. But before that, I was doing single issues and like people were reading it and stuff. So it was like, it was just cool to be able to share that story with other people.
Yeah, and like I know you started it as a couple different projects and then it became the comic book and you were
Hmm.
releasing it. What's it like seeing your vision change from like one thing to another and then being able to be like, "Hey, I have the final vision of what I want this to be like format wise." What's that process look like and how did the work change over time from that?
So you mean from okay, so from the book to the comic?
Yeah.
So as the when it started as a book, it was a bit of a darker story, and it was like sadder. So I think it was actually now it's not that it's like super happy now. It's still like a horror story, but it was much bleaker. So I think it gave me time to like kind of work through. Maybe I was working through something at the time, and kind of like create. I think maybe a more not satisfying, but it gave me time to develop the characters more, and I think that might be the main takeaway is I got to really play with the characters for a longer period of time and kind of like I think work as a writer more, which is probably the thing that I got to really develop the most is like develop as a writer over the years.
And how was that process? Because I think it is always interesting. Like we've been doing this podcast for 2 years, and we've met a lot of writer artists. What's that process like? Do you write like thumbnails, or are you writing out the scripts first? Like how, like in terms of your process, what did that look like bringing the book to life?
So I like to write my first drafts and then I write a bunch of drafts, but the draft that I work from doesn't have finalized dialogue in it. And once I draw the story, I find it much easier to write the characters. I think I like to see them. I'm obviously a very visual person. And when I see them like acting out, I can kind of like, even though I'm drawing the acting, I
Mhm.
can actually see and like be like, okay, this is what this character is gonna say, and this is what this character is gonna say. And then they can like play in their like little space. And it's like before I can actually see it, I can't get the dialogue down.
Yeah.
So that's how I work. I do um the main scripts, I draw it, and then I do dialogue.
Nice. Yeah, I think, and again, like not trying to give anything away in the book, but like as I was reading it and seeing how some of the characters were growing together and like seeing how much they care about each other, it's really interesting to hear like that dialogue came from after you drew it. And it almost like from how you're describing it, almost sounds like you already had the story like deep within you. It's just like once you can draw it, you're like, okay, I know exactly what everyone kind of needs to say. Because like you drew, when you draw them, you know the story. It's just like is uncovering it after it's been drawn.
Yeah, totally. And I think that like I have a basic idea of like kind of what they want to say. Um, but it's definitely like I think again because I wrote it as a book first that I kind of have this like I've worked with the characters for a while, so it's like I'm not new to the world. That makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, totally. And for you, where were the influences? Like, we're doing this over Zoom. We could see
Yeah.
some of the influences there.
Yeah.
And what was it like, sort of? Because obviously the horror elements are there, and you could see that. But like in terms of the story, it's horrific, but it's also like deeply personal and has like love, friendship, all these different things. So, what kind of things were you drawing from when you created the story?
Besides the surface level of, I love Universal horror, and Frankenstein, obviously, Dracula, all those movies. I love just like reading all those kind of books and stuff. I think a lot of it came from like personal experiences. I was actually dealing with like some like death in the family at the time, so like that's obviously like very prevalent within the story. And I think a lot of times writers like deal with whether it's like on the surface or like deep down, like you write stuff and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is what I was dealing with. It was like therapy for myself and I didn't realize it. But I don't think that's like the main like you don't go into it and you're not like reading a story that feels like that all the way through because it's like fun vampire. But there I think if you delve deeper you can see that. Other than that, I think yeah, those are probably the biggest one is monsters and sad dead people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And
Oh no, you could go first. Sorry.
oh, I would normally like Crisco, but I was gonna
Yeah.
say this book is gonna come out in October, and like it's definitely spooky season, so people are
Hmm.
gonna pick it up for just the fact that like that's the time of year we get into those kind of things. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of other things like you mentioned. There's like stories of like friendship and love through it. So for someone that just picks it up because they're like, oh hey, this is a cool vampire book. Like, what are some things you would hope they would take away from the book?
That's another good aspect of it would be friendship and family, especially is like that's a huge thing and like different types of family and how like different things bind people together, whether that's healthy or not so healthy, depending on the situation, and how families can be or not be healthy and how people work and deal with that.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that maybe I don't read too many comics that have like that aspect of family, or maybe that's what the entire Bat family is about.
Yeah,
But
I
that's something
definitely.
that like that's something that I feel like I don't read a lot of Batman maybe for those reasons, but I feel like I definitely got those out of the story when I finished reading it, and I'm curious to know like because this kind of ends a little bit with a cliffhanger. What would you want to do next with the story? Will it come out again like as floppies, or is it going to be like a whole graphic novel?
So I'm actually working on the second, it's like right over here, the second volume of the book right now. So I'm actually working on volume two with no spoilers. I won't say anything about it, but Theo obviously has a lot to do after volume one. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and sort of we talked sort of like your cultural influences, but you come from a family of creators, and I think
Mhm.
like for example, your dad Tom Mandrake is one of my favorites, especially their Martian Manhunter and Spectre, and their work is really influential. And I think in the '90s when it comes to that
Yeah.
horrific side, what was it like growing up and seeing and being in a household with creators and being at a point where you yourself are a creator?
I mean, it was a cool place to like that's the main thing. It was cool to grow up with that. As a kid, I was never worried like I had to do those things or like I had to create, but I was definitely like a creative kid. It was really cool because there was always comic books around. I was always like I got to watch movies. The first time I watched Frankenstein was with my dad and like he showed me all like these cool movies. I was like terrified of Frankenstein the first time I saw it. But like I wanted to watch more, that kind of thing. And all these comic books were available to me. my mom was working at on Star Wars when I was a kid and stuff, so that was like very influential to me. And so you see all this stuff, you get to see like people coming in, like you go to these conventions and stuff, so there's like all this just creative info. But again, it's your parents' job, I think, is another important aspect of it. Is like you appreciate it, but it's their job, but also the entire time you're like, oh, that'd be really cool to like be able to do, like there's a party that's like it'd be really cool to be able to create comics, right? And so it is like I was never pushed to do it or anything, but I've always loved drawing and stuff. So there's always like balance. And it was cool to have that just as like I guess that privilege of being able to have all that influence growing up. And I got to go to the Kubert school and learn from Joe and everything. Like that was really cool.
And with those influences, what was it like sort of creating the book? Were you sort of sharing that with your family, your friends? And what was the feedback and how did that evolve?
Sorry, I missed that one.
No, no, for sure. No, I was saying in terms of like having like such a big creative circle, both with your
Mm,
family and obviously the Kubert School. Were you sharing your book beforehand to sort of like get notes or grow the story, or was it something where you sort of
definitely.
like finished it and you're like, oh, read this and get back to me?
Yeah, so like I would definitely had like a lot of people to help like read the book and everything. And I don't think you can create in a vacuum. I think it's really important to be able to um write something and then have somebody else to bounce your ideas off of. So like whether it was I did definitely like show my parents at one point, but then I have like friends and my partner and stuff like showed other people like, hey, what do you think about this? Because if you're not just writing and not showing anybody that it's hard, you start to question yourself, and I think it benefits from critique.
And with Blood of the Taken, Troy brought up sort of like where you see it going next. Obviously, it's evolved in different formats. Do you see it ever becoming like a series or a movie at any point? Because I think it's a deeply personal story that lends itself to being adapted.
I mean, I love that, obviously. Who wouldn't? I mean, I'm happy as it being a comic. Obviously, it's but yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see it as like a TV show if like Netflix or Hulu wants to pick it up, because as I'm reading it and I'm looking at the art, I'm like, man, I could see maybe this person playing this character or this person playing this character, or like
Yeah.
with the makeup and effects that are there for like Theo, like the way it's drawn, I feel like I can see it already happening like in a live action. So you did a great job trying to, like, the translation feels so real. And when I'm free thinking of how the story plays out in my head, I'm like, oh, this is not that far away from being a live action because of just how well you've drawn it.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Well, that would be awesome.
Yeah. And listen, I've been having like the blues lately because soon the last season of What We Do in the Shadows is coming up. So for me,
Oh, yeah.
that's my
Yeah.
like, that's my like sort of like
We
thing.
need a replacement.
Yeah, we need a replacement, especially for me, that would like that I love the movie and sort of the 6 years since that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely made me get more into the spooky spirit. Like now I came back from Disney World and Universal a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
And I
cool.
found out like now this is when they're starting all their Halloween stuff. And I was like, well, if I had
Oh,
known that, I would have
should
pushed
have
my trip
waited.
like 2 weeks. I'm thinking they do all that in September, October. Is like, who wants to be
Okay.
there in that time? And then now I'm like,
Yeah.
because of the
The
algorithms,
weather
I'm
would still
looking.
be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? All this. I did get a Creature from the Black Lagoon hat, so I can't
Oh,
complain too
cool.
much, but I definitely feel like Blood of the Taken filled that little void. I'm feeling as again as my one of my all-time favorite shows is coming to an end. And then I know like obviously releasing it as floppies, and I'm sure you've been able to release it to the world and go to different maybe conventions or stores. What's it like been getting the response from readers?
So far, I mean, the people who have been following it, and again, the people that I had before, it's I've had a couple readers, now just to like review it and stuff, but I had a couple people reading it like before. I back when I had it on like Webtoons and a couple other places online. And I had people like follow me over from that to this version, which is really exciting. And people are like, "Oh, I can't wait for it to come out!" Like they're really excited to like see what happens to like Ed and Liam and Theo and stuff. Because I kind of left them on a cliffhanger because I think it ended around page like 60 or 70, and then I just kind of stopped producing the book for a while, so they're just like, well, what's happening, what's going to happen? So it's great. I'm really excited that they followed me and waited this long. It's been like 2 years since they saw anything.
Yeah, because like I just looked at it real quick. I'm like, man, if you left on page 60, that's a pretty big
Yeah.
cliffhanger. So I'm
Yeah.
there's no doubt in my mind that everyone that was reading it then is like, oh, I can't wait to jump back into it now, because that's not even halfway through the story and there's a
No.
giant cliffhanger right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to keep everything because I was doing every issue as like a cliffhanger. Not like a total cliffhanger, but I wanted you to come back for, the next one. I like to, have something to look forward to for the next one. So it kind of left it as like a cliffhanger, and then I stopped putting it out, and then people were like, wait, but what? But what's gonna happen?
Yeah, and I think the cliffhangers are done really well because, like, I mean, I didn't read anything like except for the whole volume,
Yeah.
or the whole novel, but like at no point in time do I really feel like, hey, we're taking a pause in the story. It all just feels like one continuous from page one when you meet the characters to all the way until the end. And there's like some small pauses because, like, it's vampires. They've got to like sleep a little bit here and
It
there.
was daytime.
But yeah, exactly. But story wise, everything keeps going. And I think you did a really good job of doing that with how you have some of the characters are able to be awake during the day and some are able to be awake during the night. Was there something specific reason why you wanted to have like the continuous like 24 hours of the story going, or did you think maybe, oh, everything could kind of happen at night? Like what was the thought process for trying to have a full 24-hour story?
I guess it just the way the characters worked out because not everybody in the story needs to be sleeping. So I guess it's just the way that the characters are. Otherwise, you have a story where everybody's asleep during, and it works. That works in Batman, right? Or the story usually takes place at night. Not always. Sometimes you have day scenes, or any kind of thing with Dracula. It's always going to take place at night unless you're going to have a human scene. But if you want the cooler scene, it's going to happen at night. If you want like a daytime scene, you can have a daytime scene. But and this gave me the time with certain characters to write during the day.
And again, thank you for coming on. It's been awesome to be able to talk to you about the book. So you can let our listeners know where they can find you and also where they can order the book.
Oh yeah, so you can get it off the Storm King website. You can also get it, I believe, through Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and that's it. So I'm pretty sure that's everything. And then you can find me at Sian Mandrake on Instagram or X, and also Threads. And then I think that's everywhere I'm at.
I mean, that's everywhere to be these days,
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Sian. We're really excited for people to get their hands on Blood of the Taken. It's a great, personal story, obviously horrific, spooky season coming up. So be sure to get the book. And with that, Badaboom.
Badaboom. Thank you for listening to the Badaboom podcast. Keep the conversation going with Chris and I on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. You can find us on all these places at Badaboom Podcast. Get into the comments on our YouTube channel. Let us know what you like about the show or what you'd like to hear from us in the future. Until next time, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thanks for listening.